Welcome to our last episode in our series on Plato's Republic. In this episode, we will be discussing Book 10. And there's so much in Book 10, I'm only going to focus on a few parts of it. And what I want to do is try to relate it with some of the themes we've been discussing already throughout this series. One of the big ones, which hopefully you've come to realize is perhaps the major theme of the Republic, which is the unification of the many into a one, and ultimately what this is, or better yet, what this does is it makes the many immortal in a way. It makes the many such that they become unified, and hence the more one that something is, you could say the more difficult it is for it to corrupt, because corruption just is a function of multiplicity or complexity, a breakdown, a fractioning apart. And so the more one or the more unified something is, the more immortal. And therefore, unity with what is perfectly one, unity with what is therefore immortal, is going to have consequences for the immortalizing of what participates in it or what shares in that, and that's ultimately what Plato gets to in this book with the discussion of the soul. But I want to begin with this conversation with Glaucon at the very beginning of Book 10 surrounding imitation and the tragic poet, and the way that the tragic poet is an imitator, and what an imitator ultimately is. Okay, and so there's a couple analogies which we'll get to between the user and the maker, and then the imitator, which I think is a helpful example, or those are some helpful examples to understand what imitation is, and why Socrates thinks that there's limitations, inadequacies of imitation, and why it ultimately is misguided, and it's ultimately misguided because it's not really aimed at truth, right? It doesn't have truth as its goal or as its end, and therefore it kind of flies wherever it wants to, and so it's more speaking to the passions in the Platonic sense we were talking about a couple episodes ago, rather than to reason. So, okay, so one of the examples discussed is the painter. So you could think about what is the example Socrates discusses is a couch, which it's sort of a silly example. We'll use it, and then we'll try to look at kind of more fruitful direct examples. But I think he uses a couch just for kind of heuristic reasons, and it might actually have something to do with the fact that it's made. It's explicitly something that's made, which is going to be significant here in a bit. Okay, so but take a couch. There's say carpenters or furniture makers that can make a couch, and in making a couch, what Socrates thinks is they're aiming at something. They're aiming to incarnate the essence of a couch. right? And so they're trying to almost reproduce something, an idea. There's an idea that they're trying to incarnate, and they incarnate this with wood and fabric and cushion and all that. But the initially confusing thing for many people that read Plato is what he thinks is that to make a couch is to try to reproduce or incarnate something which is one, which is singular, and ultimately the idea or the essence, the nature of a couch in wood, in the material. And so you can get many different instances, many different occurrences or different incarnations of a couch, but there's ultimately just one essence, right? And so in some ways, what a couch is and what couch makers do is that they're imitating that single essence of a couch. If you think about just written words, right? So you can have many different fonts. You could have many different languages, English and German and Spanish, and many different ways of writing words in each of those languages. But you can have the same word spoken in all these different languages. And so there's a sense in which these are different incarnations of this single word, of this one idea, this one concept. And so they're what you could say is they're different reproductions or presentations or incarnations or speakings of this same word. And now if this weren't the case, if this weren't possible, then it would be impossible to even conceive of translating, right? So to translate from one language to another requires or depends on the fact that there is a single word that can be manifested or incarnated in different languages, in different presentations. And it's the case that what all of these words in your book, all of these words on your computer, what all of those are, or better yet, what they all mean, is something which is beyond or transcendent to the physicality of it. And that's what allows for translation to occur. Now it's a complicated issue, which we won't be able to really get into all the details now. But the meaning of a word is that it be incarnate, and so to think about what the real word is, or the essence or the nature of a word is something which is, excarnational, or it's like removed from linguistic communities, actual linguistic communities, meaning actual occurrences of being spoken and whatnot. That I think is not true. I don't think there is such a thing as just a purely abstract language. But nevertheless, there is something transcendent to language. There has to be. Otherwise, there would be no possibility of translation. Translation just necessitates that there's a transcendent nature to words. Okay, so the imitation that occurs, Plato thinks, in the couch making, it's not really imitation. What it is, it's a reproduction. It's a You're taking the essence, and you're reproducing it such that its meaning is found in the nature of the couch, right? So if you look at something, take an example like a carburetor, and you're wondering what the heck is this thing? You're holding it and you have no idea what this thing is. You're looking for its meaning. You're looking for its logos, its reason. What's the reason that this thing exists? What's the purpose of this thing? That is something which is found in its proper use, its proper activity. And so you can look at a carburetor with perfectly good eyes and still miss its purpose, still miss its meaning. And now this happens all the time. Many of us actually do this with our own lives. We look at our lives and we look at other people and we see them, but we entirely miss the real purpose of living, right? We don't understand what it is to live, or the meaning or the logos of living, because of the fact that we don't understand its proper orientation or its proper use, or ultimately what it is an incarnation of. And so I think this is in the Judeo-Christian tradition. This is, I think, very significant, or it's very significant to put all of this within context of the very beginning of Genesis, with being made in the image and likeness of God, which is going to say that we are icons or images of God, and therefore our proper activity, our proper function or goal is ultimately going to be found in what is the life of God? What is the divine life? And so our fulfillment as human beings will be found in what it is for God to be God. And I think the same thing with a couch, or a carburetor. You look at a carburetor and you say, what's the fulfillment of this thing? What is this thing for? That's going to be found when you understand the nature of carburetors, what carburetors in their essence are for, right? And until you know that, you won't know what this piece of metal in your hand is good for. You might think it's just a completely wasted bit of scrap material that's just supposed to be a paperweight, but you're entirely misusing it because of the fact that you don't see it for what it really is. And that's just an analogy for our own lives. A lot of us might waste our lives away because we don't see our lives for what they really are. And to see your life for what it really is, you have to see it ultimately as an image or as an icon of something. And this is all, I think, within Plato's Republic. I think that's what's going on here. Now, the problem with the imitator, or with, as he puts it, the tragic poet, is that they are imitating icons or images themselves. So, whereas to carry the example on, the furniture maker is trying to reproduce or to reincarnate the idea of a couch. The painter isn't trying to incarnate the essence of a couch. What the painter is trying to do is they're trying to just incarnate the mere appearance of a couch, right? So, and they're trying to just take the extrinsic appearance of a couch and strip it from its internal nature or its internal reality, and just present it on paper. Now, I'll talk about this and why I think this might not be all art, but I think what he's trying to propose is there's a type of imitation there's a type of activity that can take the external, strip it of the internal, and present it in such a way that you get the impression that because this person is able to paint this picture or write these words or speak these words, that they really know what's going on. They really know the truth of the stuff that they're talking about, the stuff that they're presenting. But in reality, what he's saying is all they're doing is they're just portraying from their own lights meaningless shapes and sounds. And this I think can go back to the cave allegory. I think this is also very pertinent to what's going on in the cave. But the problem with these imitators, as he calls them, is that their imitation is removed from reality, so that they can say all the right words, they can draw all the right lines, but they don't really know what anything means. You could put it in terms of the person that has memorized all the right answers for an exam, and so they can get an A on the exam, and they can portray themselves or imitate someone that has knowledge, but they completely lack knowledge of what they're talking about. And now if this person is super unreflective, they might actually deceive themselves in thinking that they really know this subject matter, and they would cite their report card as proof that they really do know what they're talking about. But a report card, grades are never sufficient to constitute proof of knowledge, right? So just because you can say all the right words doesn't necessitate that you know what you're talking about. Okay, and so this is what Socrates thinks a good majority of the poets are doing, and specifically in relation to human life and what it means to live well, to live a good life, or to live a bad life, right? Even the tragic poets that depict bad human life don't understand really why such a life would be bad. And so he's trying to say that all they're doing is something analogous to what a painter within this context is doing, which is ultimately looking at an object and seeing it merely as here's a line and here's another line, and there's this amount of shading between it, and then over here there's this other shape. And so you sort of reproduce all of these disconnected shapes that intersect in various ways. And then voila, you have your painting, which can look, if you're good at this, really, really real. But you don't really even know what you painted, because of the fact that when you were doing this, you were approaching it kind of piecemeal. And that, I think, is... If anyone's even, I took a drawing class many years ago, and I used to think, I'm a horrible drawer. I can't draw to save my life. And once I took this class, and I started realizing, I have to stop thinking about I'm drawing a book right now, and I think books should look like this. And instead, I started just kind of focusing on the lines and trying to, reproduce the lines on a piece of paper in a way that everything kind of came together, and it was, in a sense, it was a better drawing than what I would have done. But that was only when I stopped seeing this as, a human, and started just seeing it as a bunch of lines kind of coming together. Now I know this is, as I mentioned earlier, this isn't the case with all art, but this is the type of art that Plato's referring to. So if there's some other type of drawing or painting which is different from this, that's not on the table for Plato. He's not addressing that. So he's not critiquing art full stop, I don't think. I think he's only addressing this type of painting, or this type of poetry even. Right? I think there's probably room for there to be other types of poetry, as you could call it, or written drama, which I believe Plato's Republic is an instance of that, right? I think Plato's Republic is a type of poetry in a way, but it's not mere imitation in the sense of you're just saying words so that you can present, an external image which will then kind of inspire or motivate people, move people in a certain way. Right, and so this is automatically, you can automatically see how this is transitioning. This whole discussion transitions into aesthetics, the philosophy of beauty, or the philosophy of art, because of the fact that what we're now realizing is that Plato's Republic is this discussion of the relation of the internal to the external, and what that's going to involve is how do we understand beauty, because what beauty ultimately is it's an external revelation of the internal reality. And so something is beautiful when its presentation corresponds, but perhaps not in just a flat type of one-to-one correspondence, but in a way that requires proper receptivity. So art is about the relationship between the external and the internal, and that's a pretty big fish to fry in just this last episode on Plato's Republic. So I don't want to get too much into that, but hopefully what you can see what he's up to is if there was a teacher that taught through imitation alone, then there wouldn't be real education, because it would just be mere words. The students might get the impression that there was learning or education going on, but it would only be a simulation of education. And this, once again, go back to the cave allegory, where you have the simulation of education in the cave, where people say, they look at the shadows on the wall and they say, oh, that's an elephant. But what they mean by elephant is merely just there's a line here and there's a line there, and then there's a line over this way, and then there's a little curvy line that we call a trunk. And so they understand an elephant, and they have a science of elephants, or a whole system of study. This is once again all metaphorical. That has to do just with the external appearance, and so they have no real understanding of what any of this really means. And now this, I think, for me, speaking personally, this becomes very personal or very real when I stop and I ask myself, do I understand what it really means to profess the things that I profess, be that in the classroom, or be that about Christianity, where you say these words and you think you know what it means. You want to think you know what it means, right? No one wants to profess things that they deep down know is just a bunch of BS or meaningless. And so you really hope that the things that you profess are things that you have some handle on, that you have some comprehension of. But it's a legitimate, important question, which is a scary question. Namely, do I really have a handle on the things that I profess to be true, the things that I profess to be what my life is about? And if you do have a handle on that, or if you think you do, how is it that you have such a grasp or such a handle on that? How do you really know that the things that you say are not just the appraisal of this external reality, but that you've actually touched the core of it? Here's an example, or a couple examples specifically revolving around like Christianity. So you profess there's three persons in one divine nature. What does that mean? What is that? Where does that ground out in actual reality for you? Is that merely just something you say because you have to say it? And it would make no difference at all to how you live or existence itself, whether that were true or not. And if that's the case, then it's just practically it becomes kind of a meaningless assertion. If it ultimately is just this disconnected thing that is said, and this doesn't. It's. I think what needs to be kind of always reminded of is that not that everything needs to be, so to speak, purely practical, but it has to have some grounding in reality, right? The claim that the wages of sin is death. What does that really mean? For some people, that is understood and grounds itself, or it becomes clear. It becomes real. Put it this way; it's a better way to put it. It becomes real for some people when they reflect on their own experience of sin, their own, and it could be their own sin, but it could be an experience of the sin of another, and this recognition of what it really is to sin, where sin, manifests itself not in theory but in reality, because theory is a seeing or a sighting of reality. It's a better way to have a vision on reality. It's not supposed to be this, step away from reality. A lot of people think what theory is you're removing yourself from reality, but actually theory should put you more in touch with reality by being able to step back and properly see reality for what it is. And so the question is, where in your own life do these things you say are so important to you, where do they prove themselves? Where do they incarnate themselves such that it's here in this particular experience or in this particular domain that this truth ceases to be abstract and becomes incarnate? Because otherwise you're just in Plato's terms, you're just an imitator. You're saying the words, but there's no reality to them. You paint the external image of a philosopher, but there's no real love of wisdom in the heart. You paint the external image of a Christian, but there's no real love of logos, love of Christ in the heart. And so there's a type of imitation that can creep in without you even realizing it. And I think what Plato's trying to do here is he's trying to say this is something that's very pervasive and very dangerous for the life of philosophy, and ultimately, therefore, for the life of the state, is that we find ourselves becoming imitators of reality rather than ones that are immersed in and fall in love with reality. And it's very difficult from the outside to distinguish the two. And I think even from the inside, it becomes difficult to distinguish the two for many people because, and this is something that I'm pretty sure is all over St. Augustine, his Confessions, that oftentimes we treat ourselves as external to ourselves. It's kind of a crazy way. We almost feel that we're distant from ourselves. We don't know ourselves. We don't really know why we're doing the actions we're doing. Why am I saying the things I'm saying? What's the real root of what I profess? What's the real root of my study of philosophy? What's the real root of my study of theology? What's the real root of my profession of Christ? Is it ultimately a love of the reality of wisdom, the love of the reality of God, or is it just a pseudo love of the image of God, the pseudo love of the image of wisdom? And this is the hard truth about this, which is that we don't want to admit that we're not actually wise. We're not actually, real lovers of reality. And so we kind of, unfortunately, have this default which prevents us from wanting to admit that it's even possible for us to be, as using the Platonic language, that we're tragic poets in our own right, meaning we're only presenting imitations. We're imitators, and not the real deal, as they say. I think there was an Eminem song back in the early 2000s about the real Slim Shady, and I think the thing is we don't many of us, myself included, don't understand how to become immersed in reality, how to cease to be imitators and to actually, become lovers and incarnate images of the true. Because the painter is to the physical world, as the believer is to the forms, right? So you can imitate thought without actually being in tune with what you're thinking, just as you can imitate a landscape without really being attuned to what's really there. And so belief is or the mind is like a canvas by which eternal truths can be imaged, and that image is either going to be a real legitimate type of imaging, or it's only going to be a pseudo imitative imaging, which is just stripped of all inner truth, inner reality. Now, this is all sort of putting this metaphorical, and it's difficult, very difficult to describe what's going on here. Okay, and so the power of imitation, the power of the tragic poets lies in the fact that they have been able to master something. They haven't mastered reality itself, meaning they haven't. I shouldn't say master reality itself. They haven't wedded themselves. They haven't become good at wedding themselves to reality. Rather, they've become good at playing a certain type of game, which takes the broad contours of reality and it puts it, say within various like rhyme and meter, and now you could put this in this happens in like film in a completely different way. It takes reality and it kind of skews it in a way, and it makes it in the eyes of many people even more interesting than reality. So think about how strange it is that many people find movies much more fascinating and interesting than their own families, their own peers, their own friends. It's the case that for many people, they would rather be immersed in this pseudo fake world of Netflix. That's a more attractive world to be immersed in. Reality is so much better in film. Reality seems so much better in the tragic poetry than it is in real reality. And this is, I think something which we don't often want to admit, but we find ourselves realizing because of the hard work of the people that make all of this imitation. We find it more persuasive. We find it more enticing. It draws us in. It attracts us, and therefore, this is very dangerous in the eyes of Plato because it excites and it appeals to our passions, and it says you should live in the reality that your passions draw you to, or the quote reality that your passions draw you to. And it just so happens that the passions, if they're not ultimately being drawn to whatever reason is identifying as true or as really real, then the passions are going to be drawing you towards a fake reality or a pseudo-reality, which is ultimately going to lead to your unfulfillment as a human being, because it's ultimately going to make you unjust. Meaning, once again, right? Remember what justice and injustice is. There's now an internal disorder in you because of the fact that the passions have chosen their own reality to live in. This is, probably, I would say, imitative poetry is probably very similar to fake film, or even I think in many ways, like if you put it within the context of like social media or kind of other online worlds, there's a world online which many of us would sort of think of as a type of reality or world that you live in. you live in the world of Facebook, or you live within the world of Twitter. But it also gets even more kind of perverse, I think, with the movement into having a second life, and it's the case that second life on this abstract platform is more meaningful for a lot of people than their incarnate life, their life in the flesh with their family and with their friends and at work. They're constantly looking to flee from reality and go into this abstracted, imitative reality. And so you kind of think, if only I could forget that I had to work right now, and I could just get sucked into a movie or sucked into this online community. I think that is what makes those communities, those false communities, false societies, so attractive for many people, is that they appear, they seem better, they seem more desirable to live in this online community than in real reality, because in real reality there are consequences, there's expectations, reason, logos has the control. It's sort of the lawgiver. But in the online world, it's the passions that has the control. That's the lawgiver, and so at least many people are drawn to that because of the fact that it's more, or at the very least, it seems more fulfilling initially. But what this ultimately does is it ultimately makes you unjust, because it using the image from Book 9, and it feeds this monster inside of you, which causes this internal fraction, and that causes you to be at war with yourself, right? And so, I think this is the reason that Plato is so concerned with imitative poetry, is that it makes us unjust, because it makes us lovers of false reality. And what loves false reality is the passions, not reason, because reason, sort of by definition, loves the true, right? And so it makes you a lover of false reality. And so now this should be like a word of caution. What is it? What's driving your life? Is it love of a false reality, or is it love of the truth, the true reality? And how would you go about determining that question? It's not something that you sort of de facto or get right by just thinking, oh no, I'm really concerned about reality, because we often deceive ourselves. And that's the challenge. That's the work of philosophy. The ultimate question or command of the life of the philosopher is to know thyself, and in being honest with yourself, you not only do yourself a favor, but you put yourself in a position to be united with what is actually real, even if it doesn't seem initially pleasing, because it might turn out that you are being led by a part of you which doesn't want what's real, because it doesn't find it initially pleasing or enticing. And so that's I think the great task, the great challenge of the philosopher, which you see throughout the Republic, ultimately the life of education, is the life of being honest with yourself, and being able to unite yourself with what is true, so that you see yourself as an image or as an icon of what is higher, so that the lower, through this imitation of I shouldn't say imitation because that's a technical term, but the lower, through its participation in the higher, is elevated. It gets elevated. It gets dignified, and it becomes divine in its being incarnate. Right? It's a very beautiful thing. Just as the written letters on the page become meaningful through their participation in what is beyond the page, and therefore the life of the written word is found in the unwritten logos. And if you think about what man is it's the written word of an unwritten logos. Then our lives get their meaning when they speak, and what it is for human life to speak ultimately is to act. So when we act in such a way that we reveal that unwritten logos, ultimately the good, we become clearer images of the good, and this is what it is for the philosopher to become a light, illuminative to other people, because it makes manifest the good itself through activity. And that's ultimately what virtue is. Virtue is the shining forth of the good through the actions of those that participate in the good.